What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Real Raw Conversations, a safe place to talk about hard things. And today I have my good friend Ashley Welsh with us. She is from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and she works for a nonprofit there that's not unlike the Hope Project called Zoe Freedom Center. And as we've gotten to know each other and kind of partner with each other, and our ministries are talking about doing more and more together, I've been really fascinated and intrigued to hear her story because I think, like I told her the other day, I think that her story can help a lot of people that are struggling with someone who is dealing with addiction, or maybe somebody who's dealing with addiction themselves. So today, we're going to talk with her. We're going to hear about her life and some of the difficulties that she's overcome dealing with addiction and loss. And it's going to be great. You ready, Ashley?
I'm ready.
All right. So first of all, I wanted you to just kind of tell us your story and what led up to kind of the culmination of needing to get yourself well and find some freedom from codependency.
Absolutely. So I wish I could say that I have, successful addiction stories, but mine are kind of on the other end. I grew up around addiction and I didn't really know it at the
Hmm.
time. I thought it was pretty normal. For my dad to wake up and pour himself a drink and I start by saying my dad was such a great guy and very loving and very functional too. So I think growing up around that, I didn't know that there was an issue. He ran a successful business, loved me and my sister, always rode us around on his motorcycle, and just didn't really know that there was an issue. And when I got older, I think I felt in my heart that healthy choices were not being made. I started to kind of see that there was an issue there. And I'll tell you, Chad, the only reason I'm here today is because I have made every mistake
Hmm.
in the book
Amen.
dealing with
Me
people
too.
who are addicted. I've made every single mistake, and I've learned from them, and that's why I'm here today.
Hmm.
And I think when I started to realize that there was an issue with my dad, I I was scared. He was my dad and I loved him and I didn't want to create any distance between us. And so that was my first mistake, is not being brave enough to say something.
Hmm.
Um, and then, as time went on, when I was a teenager, he went into a rehabilitation center that was probably not suited best for him, for what he needed. And I know it was really difficult on him. I remember speaking to him when he was in the facility. And then again, my next mistake, he came out of it and I said, oh, well, he's done. Great. We're
Yep.
cured. And that's it. The days that he would struggle, I would, push him forward and say, well, you're done. Just keep looking forward and not really celebrating what he had done, and then continuing to encourage him. And at this point, I have a brother that's much younger than I am. And I, when my dad started to fall back into old ways, I would use kind of threats, that he needed to be there for my brother, and he was being selfish and making his choices. And so many wrong things that I did. And ultimately, so he died in 2015.
Hmm.
Um, and he is obviously very missed.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I still didn't really know how to deal with it after it was gone. I didn't really tell anybody, you know, what he was dealing with in his past. And I think I had a lot of shame about how I handled it.
Yeah.
Um, and then, fast forward 2 years, and in 2017, I lost Stephen, who's very important to me.
Hmm.
And that just kind of broke me, Chad.
Hmm.
I have never struggled with addiction myself, but if I can tell you that addiction just robbed me of joy. It robbed me of
Mm.
people, and it put me in my darkest place that I have ever been in. So
Wow.
though I haven't struggled with needing that high or falling, just needing to go and find something, it definitely put me at my rock bottom.
Yeah.
After losing them,
And how did they pass?
so my dad, you just can't drink for that long
Yeah.
and not have it take a toll on your body. So I do see God's glory in that. He had just eternally, healed my dad. And Stephen passed away from a heroin overdose in
So sorry.
2017 after burying many of his friends from the same thing. So it's like a plague around here and everywhere actually. But after losing them, I again made the mistake. Apparently, I have to learn from my
Mm.
mistakes, and I sat in the corner of my couch for a year, and I wallowed, and I just felt at my rock bottom
Mm.
until I was able to recognize that I needed to find freedom from my loved ones' addictions,
Yeah.
and that God just lit a fire in my heart and said, you need to get up. You need to not let it be in vain. So go work past your shame and your guilt and see what you can do in the community. And I really just kind of didn't know what to do with that for another year, and just kind of looked to see where I could help, what I could do. And then God just had a path for me and put Mark and Dana Brown and the Zoe Freedom Center right in my path. And I met them, and our vision of, just kind of aligned, and they literally were stuck with me from
Yeah.
that moment. Whether they liked me or not, I said, I'm not leaving. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do my part. So
Wow.
that's kind of a little
So
bit about my story.
So you said that, and thank you so much for sharing all that. And I mean, my heart just breaks for the loss that you've endured. But you said that you had to find freedom from the addiction of your dad and Stephen. Tell me about what that looked like. What was the process for you? Because I know you said you were in a really dark place for about a year there. What was the
Mm-hmm.
process for you to kind of get back to where you needed to be and get back to where you were kind of thriving and you had joy again? And what did that look like
Yeah.
for you?
Um, I think I had to hit rock bottom. I think sometimes people need to, in my own way, I did. I'm a hard worker, thought I could do things myself. And I think God was telling me, I need you to kind of cry out to me and lean on me and, let me light
Yeah.
this path for you. And so it really, it was being honest with myself that the number one thing I had in my heart was guilt. Guilt that I
Mm,
did not handle my father's addiction the right way, that the last things I said to him were not encouraging, were not kind, were not loving. And guilt that I did not see the road Stephen was going down, because I loved these men so much that I was
yeah.
I was ignoring it. I was blind to it, or I just didn't want to see what was going on. So I had an extreme amount of guilt about what was going on. And so it literally for me was, we have a 16-week program through my church that's called Freedom. And
Mm,
it's basically a program that you are going through that helps you to gain the tools to find freedom from your past baggage, whatever it is, and gives you the tools to kind of, because it's not all sunshine and roses, right? Just because we
right.
have Christ in our heart doesn't mean that every day is going to be easy.
Mm,
But it gives us those tools to not really fall back in those past mindsets, those past
yeah.
habits. And so I just I'm huge on perspective, Chad. I love when a season comes and I can grow from it. And that's what it was. It was a really, really, really difficult season, but
Mm,
it brought me to where I am now. And where I have this fierce fire now to do anything I can to help, whether it's one person, 100 people, a million, just to be the change
yeah.
wherever I can. And so I'm thankful for it. I miss my guys a whole lot.
Yeah.
I do feel I hope that I'm, though I'm talking about darkness that was in their own lives, that, I never want either one of them to be defined by their addiction. And I think
Yeah.
anybody who would say that they've
Amen.
lost somebody, that there was so many more things to both my dad and Stephen that were so much more than the darkness that they were dealing with. So
That's really good. It's really insightful. So one thing that I love that you said, and one thing that we always try to explain at the Hope Project is that walking with Jesus is not always sunshine and roses. There are some really hard days. And so tell us what that looks like for you. You know, you've had those hard days and you're walking with Jesus. Tell us about what that looked like for you, and we'd just love to hear a little bit more about the fact that it isn't all sunshine and roses with Jesus. Matter of fact, when you get saved, it might get worse, but you get to walk with the Savior of the world.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think when we accept Christ, it doesn't mean that the road is clear and
Hmm.
that the sun's always out, but it means we have someone almighty, all powerful,
That's
all
right.
knowing, we have a teammate who's going to lead us and be there for us, and that we don't have to do these things alone, that we literally can be the weakest versions of ourselves. And that's when
Yeah.
he's going to come in and
Mm.
say, I mean, really, he just wants us to cry out to him and
Yeah.
use, to say
Mm.
that it's okay to be weak.
Yeah.
He doesn't want us to think that we're so strong that we don't need him, because
Right.
that's a pride issue. And
Yep. That's
we
right.
want to be humble in front of God. And I just think that when we go through these seasons, now I don't think that this happened just to get me to
Right.
where I am. It's just, my perspective of it. But when he puts us in these seasons, or when we go through these challenges, it's him using us.
Yep.
And we have the ability, if we see things the right way, to grow
Yeah.
and to
For His
just
glory and
kind
for
of
our good.
absolutely, absolutely. So I really do. I welcome any now, now I feel like I'm super tough now, because, of what I've been through. But I do. I welcome any chance that he gives me, because I know when we're going through that he's got something for us
Yeah.
on the other side. So I almost welcome it now that I know all of the
Yeah.
mistakes that I've made,
Yeah.
so I can do it properly this next
That's
time. So
so great. One thing that we always talk about, and is kind of one of my life verses, is, since putting my faith in Jesus in 2011, there are some things about me that are better, and He's changing and He's sanctifying, but some things that I'm still like, why God? Why don't you just take this from me? And the verse always comes to my mind where Paul says about the thorn in his side. He said, I asked 3 times for God to remove the thorn from my side. And He said, my grace is sufficient. My power is made great in your weakness. And I try to remember that it's okay for me to be weak, especially in macho guy culture. You feel like you've got to be strong and tough, but I don't have to be tough. He's tough for me. He was tough
absolutely.
enough to overcome the grave. I think He's tough enough to help me and make this weak vessel stronger. So I want to hear
Absolutely.
a little bit more about this freedom course that you went through, because it sounds like it was a really profound time in your life, and you learned a lot. Could you give us maybe like the top 3 things that you took away from that helped you to find some freedom?
It is life changing. So much so. So a lot of churches under like the ARC ministries
Yeah.
do this freedom program, and I think what I took away from it is it freed me of a lot of shame that I was holding. And it also was, it's one of that cliche thing, you're going to get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's literally a course that's kind of guiding you, behind you, showing you how to lean into God,
Yeah.
and I think there's a conference at the end of it. And It literally was just chains broken over and
Oh,
over and
wow.
over again. And I walked out of there with feeling lighter. I had
Yeah.
freedom from things. I knew didn't mean it was over, but I was given purpose. I
Yeah.
was given a lot of purpose in it, and it was literally walking out of conference that I knew exactly what God had put on my heart, and that though I have never struggled with addiction myself, that He had a plan for me to be a part of a ministry that was
Mm.
going to help people, because it is not just the person struggling with addiction who is hurting.
Yeah.
It's the support system. It's the family. And so I said, though I can't speak, I don't have my own addiction story. In a way I do. And I want other
Yeah.
people to be able to be encouraged and know that they're not alone, and
Yeah.
help, those families and loved ones find freedom like I did.
That's really good. I heard you say the words clarity and purpose. It sounds like you got some clarity through this conference and some purpose. And so, say somebody's watching right now and they're like, "Well, I want clarity. I want purpose. I want to figure out God's plan through all this pain and figure out what I can do."
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like for somebody watching that was just like, "Hey, I need to get on this plan of to find clarity and purpose. I want to feel lighter too, just like Ashley." What does
Mm-hmm.
that look like? Is there, is it daily reading in the Bible, books? Can you recommend books, or is there something that we can give people to chew on that says, "Hey, I can go down this path now, and I can find some
Mm-hmm.
real clarity and purpose and ultimately freedom."
That's a really good question. I do think it's getting into God's
Yep,
words. I am not much of a reader, if I'm being honest myself, except for the Bible. So I don't have any books or
nothing
anything,
wrong with
but
that.
I think there's good and evil in the world, right? I mean, God has a plan for us, but there's other forces in this world that are trying to keep us in bondage,
Yep.
whatever that bondage is for that person. Um, and it kind of brings me back to a story where they say bank tellers can tell a counterfeit dollar, not because they study the counterfeit dollar, but because they work with the real thing so
Mm,
often that they're able to tell when they have a fake one in their hands. And so I try and encourage people that if you're reading God's word every single day, it's going to light a path for you.
mm,
It's going to speak to you. You're going to open your heart, and God's going to speak to you. And if that is becoming your authority and your constant,
yeah.
then you're going to know when fake things come at you,
Yeah.
when things that are not of Him.
Mm,
If you're going to know when those counterfeit things are coming at you, and
yeah.
you're going to kind of have His truth like instilled in your DNA, where it's just second nature to you,
Yeah.
where you know the good choices and the bad choices.
Yeah.
But I think God can heal us in a second. He can give us freedom in a second, but it's that step of faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that getting up and taking the step of faith,
Yeah.
not just, if I had sat on, like I said, if I had sat on the corner of my couch where I was wallowing for a year, God he could come and help me then, but He wanted to see my faith in Him, and
Yeah.
saying, like, I'm going to get off this couch and I'm going to go and sign up
Yeah.
for this group, and I'm going to attend it. And so it does take a leap of faith on our
Yeah.
part. And
It really
so,
does.
mm-hmm.
So if there's somebody watching right now, and or say you have another friend that comes in your life, and maybe he becomes a boyfriend, and then you realize that he's deadly addicted to heroin. What do you do differently than you did before you had found all this purpose and this clarity? And probably don't date him, right?
Everything. No, I would do everything differently.
Tell us about that.
I really would. I think now, um, if you have, I mean, just to anyone that's struggling with addiction, I think that it's important to be encouraging to them, to help shame be lifted, guilt be lifted.
Yeah.
And just to be encouraging and say, well, how about this? If I'm speaking to like the families or any support system of someone who's struggling, I would say, to educate yourself. I wish I had educated myself on what addiction is, how it works, why it happens to people, how, the mental process of someone who's addicted is, just kind of put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
Realize that someone that's struggling with addiction is not doing it purposefully to anybody else, that it's not intentionally, they're not intentionally using to hurt somebody else. They're sick.
Yeah.
I say, set your healthy boundaries. It's okay to have them. I think when you are, my thing is when you love someone who's addicted, you are hopeless because you have no control.
Right.
You cannot force anybody to do anything. So I think it's okay to have healthy boundaries. It puts your feet under you. It gives you a sense of foundation, it's
like the top thing, I think, is healthy boundaries.
And I think some people think they either need to be completely closed or completely open, but I think those boundaries are okay. And it's, whether it's, I choose not to support you financially, but I will give you a safe place to stay.
Right.
Or you can stay here, but you can't use in my house. Or this isn't a right fit for you to stay here, but let's find a healthy and safe place for you to be. We all can set a healthy boundary. I think transparency is huge. Transparency allows us to have these conversations that help to break the stigma of addiction, because that's number one. I mean, my number one thing is just be transparent, help to break the stigma where people think that they can't talk about mental health issues or talk about addiction, because, me and Dana talk about this a lot, where addiction is this mountain. It's not one person. It's not young, old, black, white, female, male. It's across the board.
Yep.
And some people think you have, people who are struggling with addiction are only homeless living under a bridge. When you have that extreme to lawyers and doctors, I mean, it spans across every occupation. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a race. It doesn't have an occupation. It doesn't have a education level. It's everybody. Yeah. So I think being transparent is huge. And find somebody, if you don't understand it, find somebody who's comfortable telling their story. Because every time I have these conversations, somebody is always like, me too, or I went through that same thing. And when you open that door, it becomes easier for that person to speak about their testimony. And I just think sharing testimonies always is going to help. And it helps them not to feel alone, but really, I think love comes very naturally to us. It comes much easier than we allow it to be. I think sometimes we get caught up in wanting to prove a point to somebody, or being tough and pushing them away to show them that we don't agree with them. And, it's kind of that thing we tell people a lot, like unconditional love is not acceptance of a behavior that you disagree with. That you can absolutely love somebody and still disagree with the choices that they're making that are hurting themselves. But when you take that love away or that encouragement away, it just kind of puts them deeper into hopelessness. And what do they have? What do they have if we're not showing them that they can get through it? I just, to reach out for help. I pray a lot that there are more places in the future, like Zoe Freedom Center, like the Hope Project, that are welcoming anybody and everybody with open arms, no judgment, understanding, love, and not trying to, force anyone's hand when they're not ready, because I'm sure from life experience that no one was going to make you.
That's right.
No one was going to make you get clean and get sober and find freedom. It needs to be when the person is ready
Yeah.
to do it, and they need to know that they're surrounded by a support system that's going to
Yeah.
love them through it. So
And I know
that
one
may
of
have been the total tangent from the
No, that's
question.
great. That's great. And I know one great book if you're like, man, I just want to educate myself on addiction and, I want to figure out how to love them better is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is one of the best books written, I believe, on addiction. The first 164 pages are the meat of what addiction is, and it even has a chapter to the families. And I know when I got sober, one of the first things I did was hand my mom a big book and say, "Read this, so we can meet, so we can meet each other." And so, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Ashley Welsh today, and she is from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and she works for an organization called Zoe Freedom Center, and they're doing some really great work. And we've been talking about doing more stuff to partner together and ultimately help eradicate addiction together. And we're talking about the fact that she's suffered some great loss in her life, but it has really helped to mold and to shape who she is, and her mess has really turned into a message. Her misery has turned into her ministry. I think this is a great example of that. And so we're talking about taking care of what it looks like to get yourself well if you've got someone who's addicted. And so I'd love for you to speak into the fact or into the point of how important is it for someone who is struggling with someone who is addicted? How important is it to first take care of yourself, take care of your own mental health, and get yourself well and find a support system and all those good things?
I think you absolutely do, and I don't think people focus on that. We focus on the one person who's struggling, which is
Yep.
very, very important, because we want them to know that there is a tomorrow, that there is a last time that they can use, and that we want continuous tomorrows for the person who's
Yeah.
struggling. But I think we, as families, support systems, loved ones of the person struggling, need to be educated on addiction
Yeah.
and exactly what I said, putting yourself in the person's shoes. But it is so important that now we have these groups that you can attend to get kind of just fed into and just
Yeah.
poured into and life spoken over you, that one, you are not the only parent, loved one, brother, sister,
Yeah.
uncle, aunt of someone who's addicted.
Yeah.
It touches more families than people know. So it helps you to not feel alone. Again, that transparency thing, when you hear other people's stories, because everyone's at a different point in their walk through
Yeah.
this. So if you are finding help, whether it's individual counseling or whether it's in a PAL meeting or any sort of group, you're going to hear somebody undoubtedly who's ahead of you in this process, and you can take what they've learned or their story and apply it to your life.
Yeah.
And then you're also pouring into the person behind you who may just see addiction starting in their family, and you're halfway into it, and your story is going to help feed into them too. So
Yeah.
it really is working together. We are not alone.
Right.
No matter how you struggle with addiction, whether physically or a byproduct of it, there are ways to get poured into
Right.
and to be ready. I think that's the call to action. Prepare yourself for when your loved one says, "Today is the day.
Yeah.
I am ready." Because if you don't act in that moment, tomorrow might be different.
Yep.
Because from me speaking to people who are in active addiction, though sometimes those moments are fleeting.
Yeah.
It's a
So true.
5-minute window of, I want to be different right
Yeah.
now, and you need to act quickly. So be prepared for when that
Yeah.
day or when that minute comes.
Yeah. That's so good. I know in my situation, I had a sister who loved me a whole lot, and she was prepared for the day that I said, "Hey, I'm not suicidal, but I'm killing myself with drugs and alcohol, and I'm ready. And that day, she got me into a detox center, and then after that, I went into a 4-month treatment program. I think it's really important to know too that if you have somebody that's severely addicted, a 7-day detox is not going to get it. They have got to go into some long-term treatment, and they're like, oh, but I've got a job and I've got this, and it's like, no, it's 4 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 90 days out of your life. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the legacy you're going to leave if you do not eradicate addiction in your life. And so
Mm-hmm.
she spoke into the fact that you need community, you need people around you. And I know you guys offer small groups, right, for the
Mm-hmm.
families and for the people that are addicted. And so the Hope Project also offers small groups. We have a small group that's specifically for family members, and that meets on Mondays at 7:15. And the reason we say, hey, we're not just doing ministry for the addicts, but for the whole families, because this is a family cancer. You have to cut it out of the entire family. And if you want your loved one to get better, you better work on you getting better too. Because I know that most of the time the families are as sick as, if not sicker, than the individual themselves because they have just been spiritually, beaten down and, mentally and emotionally. They are just down to nothing. But we know when you're down to nothing, God's up to something. Ask for help. Reach out to us and ask for help. If you're watching this and you're a part of Zoe Freedom Center, reach out to this great organization and ask for the help because it's what we're here for. It's what we know God has called us to do, and we don't do it because we have to. We do it because we want to. So tell me about that. Now you've got this fire to help fight addiction, and our ministries, again, I've said, are so aligned on so many things. We have the same heart of like, hey, let's just go eradicate addiction. Let's just do
Mm-hmm.
it. So tell me about that fire. What does that look like for you now?
It is. I was so happy to have. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. It was, I'm only one person. What can I do? And God had a plan for me, and He said, "I'm going to put some people in your life, and they've already have this vision, and they have this plan." And so, by the time I had met Mark and Dana, we were introduced through one of my leaders at church. I'm on a prayer team, and
Mhm.
she said, you talk about addiction a lot. I've got some people I want you to meet. And I'm so lucky because God had already put a vision on their heart and they had already
Mm.
laid it out on paper. And here I came in with this fire and I said, I'm going to make this happen. Give me a list. I'm going to make it happen. And so I'm so thankful that, that one, God freed Dana from addiction.
Mm.
Cause her testimony is wildly powerful. And just shows, I mean, I hope that you have her on one time so you can hear her
Oh, we're
story
going
too,
to.
because it is definitely showing you that Jesus will use the bottom of the barrel people to make
Yeah.
massive moves in
Come
this
on.
in this world. And she is just a huge testament. And her wonderful husband Mark Brown, they heard God's call, saw His vision, and said, "Oh my gosh, this is huge! I can't believe we're going to do this." And so when I jumped on board, it was a little baby that was
Yeah.
getting worked into a bigger ministry, and we have just been all hands on deck. We're a small team, but we have so many volunteers and people that just have been
Yeah.
helping us. And maybe if they don't even understand, they just see the fire that we have in us, or they just want to help in any way, because we are a very joyful ministry. Addiction is very
Amen.
heavy and very sad. And we have had to find the joy in what we're doing. Otherwise, people would not want to come to
Yeah.
her. I mean, you have to be happy on some level about the moves that we have the potential to make. And so we host meetings now. We have a lot to come. We've had benefit concerts,
That's
and
awesome.
we are helping people. I think, addiction is heavy. It got hard to ignore. I think it is getting, I can only speak for our area, but I think it is getting difficult for people to ignore that we are losing people
Yeah.
by the day, and that it is not okay anymore. And one of the big reasons I do this too is watching, and it's kind of a heavy sentence, but watching Stephen's mom lay him to rest was probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. And so, though I can't bring him back, I can hopefully do her some justice or help her feel better that somebody else isn't going to lose their kid by what we're doing. Hopefully,
Oh man, I know we've got some people that are part of our ministry that have lost children, and it is such a, I just can't even imagine what they go through, and they might even be watching tonight, and it's just our heart goes out to them. But they're usually the most passionate people about what they do when they're a part of this, because they just want to see some lives saved, and that's what we want. We want to see lives saved, and ultimately eternal lives saved. So. Real quick, what would you tell, well, not real quick, doesn't have to be quick. What would you tell someone who is watching that has a friend or a family member that is suffering from addiction? I know we kind of talked about that, but what are a few steps that can help them kind of get out of what, find some freedom from it?
Yeah, I think be present in their lives. Know your role, that we are never going to be able to force someone to find freedom.
Yeah.
But be present, check in with them. Don't be afraid to, in the right, loving, graceful way, call them out and say that you see that there's an issue. And when they're ready to talk about it, that you're there. And then be there. Be there to listen with unjudgmental ears. Pray that you see this person the way Jesus sees them.
Yeah.
Just a person who has, having it, just that has bondage, like we all do. Every single one of us does. None of us are better than, none of our bondage is better than the others. And so I think being present, be encouraging. If you can't be those things, find someone who can be that for that person. It's okay to be humble with yourself and say, I don't know what to say. I'm not an encourager. Find somebody who is. We all have gifts, and they're all different, which is great, because if I'm operating in my gift, then I'm going to help you operate better in your gift.
That's right.
Whatever that's going to look like for people. So there is somebody that you can reach out to. So be present, be encouraging, be loving, be non-judgmental. And these things come a lot easier than we give ourselves credit for. It's so much harder to hate and judge than it is to love and accept. And
but
then
doing those things, I'm sure you would say, without enabling. And because like you mentioned
those healthy
earlier,
boundaries.
Those healthy boundaries need to continue to be boundaries. Don't let them break down the boundaries, because they will try you hard.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, where I don't think that the person who decides that they are ready to find freedom from addiction is going to have to go through a very intense struggle. And that is going to be something that you can speak to more than I can, where it is going to physically and mentally hurt you. And it is very difficult, as the person who loves addicts, to worry constantly about where they are they alive, are they using, and then to say, when they do want to be clean, okay, you're going to have to watch a person. So you're right. Don't enable them. Prepare your heart. And then I think also find those places in your area that are going to be able to help your loved one.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. We talk about this a lot. Please, please, please find one. This is not cured in a week.
Yeah.
This is not 7 days, 7 days to, a
Yep.
lifelong change. I think when people say, well, it's hard and it's expensive and it's time consuming, the person is worth it. And if you're the one struggling,
Yes.
you are worth it. You were
Yeah.
not meant to live a life in bondage. God does not want that
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
So however freedom looks for you, whatever that path is, whether it's overnight freedom, you're miraculously healed, that is wonderful. Whether it is a process that takes a long time, you are worth whatever input you have to put in, whether time, financially, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you're just worth it.
Yes. That's really great because it leads me into my last question for you. I love the fact that you said, "Hey, if you're watching and you're struggling with addiction, you're worth it," because I know oftentimes the things that we do in active addiction cause a lot of guilt. And what happens with untreated guilt when you don't take care of these fears and these, you know, the guilt that comes from all the bad things you do in addiction. It turns into shame, and then shame tells you that you're a bad person. See, guilt just says you did a bad thing, you need to do better. Shame
Mm-hmm.
says, hey, you are a bad person, and there's no room for shame in the life of a Christian. And if you're not a Christian today, we would love for you to reach out if you have questions. We're always willing to have the conversation and help you to find that freedom and walk with Jesus. Because I'm telling you guys, you know my story. I was a heroin addict, struggled for 15 years, and in 2011, Jesus saved me miraculously. But like she said, it was a process over about 4 months, and now it's been a lifelong commitment. But that 4 months is when I needed to really focus on what my recovery looked like. I worked a 12-step program. Not everybody has to, but it really helped me to grow with Jesus because the 12 steps are just basic Christian living. Um, but I would love to hear, what do you have to say to the one that is watching today that is maybe horribly heroin addicted, or has an alcohol problem that they're physically addicted to? What would you say to them if you could look right in the camera today and know that they are on the other side of that camera?
I would say that you mean the world to someone,
Yeah.
that you are worthy of living a full life, and that there can be a last time that shame is not welcome in your life.
Yeah.
And my God doesn't put us in a hierarchy. Just because I'm not addicted doesn't mean I get to sit in the front row at church. That my
Preach.
God that I
Preach.
believe in wants you in the front row,
Come on.
and can bring you out of that darkness when you're ready. So the great part is God can meet you where you're at. You don't have to take any steps. He can come right to you where you
Yeah.
are in this moment. And when you're ready, there are places like the Hope Project, like Zoe Freedom
Yeah.
Center, and many more that are available with loving, open arms, understanding where you've been and where you can be, and are ready to walk alongside you.
Yeah. That's so good. And so thank you so much for
Absolutely.
being a special guest today. And thank you so much for just sharing your amazing story. You are living proof that people can recover from the bondage of struggling with someone who is deadly addicted. And it's so cool to see you walking now in a calling that God called you after some really bad times. And so it's just a great example of the fact that God doesn't let anything go wasted. That
Exactly.
that happened, and unfortunately it happened, but He's now using it for His glory and for your good and for the good of those people that are a part of the Zoe Freedom, the Zoe the Zoe Freedom Center.
We have a long name, the Zoe Freedom Center.
I love it. It's different. And so these guys are doing some really great work, and I'm just super excited and expectant for what God has for our ministries to do together and to partner together in the future. And man, thank you again so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Chad. I really appreciate it. And I thank you for your ministry pointing out that this is an important topic too,
Yeah.
to talk with the families and loved ones. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, and I've told you this many times, but we are so grateful for other ministries like you that are moving the ball down the court to fight addiction, to fight overdose, to eradicate these things, and ultimately share the gospel of Jesus Christ with people.